Hello, welcome to Ashram Talks. This is Atul Krishna Das. I am your host for today. And in previous session, we were talking about karma yoga and how to act in our day to day. Last Monday, we had the wonderful Simon Haas talking about three guiding principles about how to live and how to declutter our mind and feel like we have a purpose in every single day. And just as a reminder for everybody, those three principles were basically be true to your own nature, let go of the results, and finally, make your work an offering. Today, we're going to expand a little bit more about that third principle that we didn't have the opportunity to talk about before, and how, when doing so, you can live a life of purpose. So many times you may feel like you have all these accomplishments, but you want more. And perhaps you feel empty or you feel like, what's there more to do in life, right? And no matter how much you achieve, at some point you may feel like, what is the meaning of all of this? My life have a purpose? So today we're going to see how we can act every single day and have this feeling on the inside that our life on itself is purposeful. And with that, um, let me welcome Simon. Hello, Simon.
Atul Krishna Peru, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So today we'll be looking at verse 45 of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. And I can't believe how quickly we've moved through chapter 1 and now through chapter 2. We're now looking at karma yoga, so the yoga of skillful action. And in last Monday, we began an overview of karma yoga, focusing on three different steps. And as Atul Krishna mentioned, we'll be focusing a little more on the final step, which is make your work an offering. And living in this way, our daily work becomes an act of worship. It helps us rise above the shifting qualities of this world, known as the three gunas. And we'll have a look at the three gunas today, because that's part of the subject of this particular verse that we're going to be looking at. So, as usual, I'll begin with a Mangala Charana, an auspicious invocation. He Shri Guru Jnana Dadina Bandho Svananda Data Karunaika Sindho Brindavana Sina Hitavatara Prasidha Radha Pranaya Prachara. So we turn to verse 45 of chapter 2. So, as you know, the warrior Arjuna has fallen into an existential crisis, a dark night of the soul, in between two great armies at Kurukshetra in what is today northern India. And in between those two armies, Arjuna turns to Sri Krishna and asks him for advice. He's not sure what to do and what not to do. He's in a deep existential crisis. And Krishna begins by sharing teachings of Sankhya, a tradition in India known as Sankhya, and also Vedanta. The Vedanta tradition, some of you may be familiar with this. It's based on the Upanishads, ancient texts from the Vedas. And so Krishna shares these teachings on the nature of the unchanging self. That is the self that is different from the changing physical body and the mind. In other words, different from the central character in our small human story. And then now at this point in chapter 2, Krishna turns to karma yoga, the yoga of skillful action. And so before explaining in detail what this system of yoga is, he begins by explaining its benefits. So if you've been following previous episodes, you will have seen that Krishna is highlighting the key benefits of karma yoga. For example, in verse 40, Krishna has explained that there's no loss in this practice. Many practices, for example, various practices enjoined in the Vedas, unless a particular ritual or other practice is completed perfectly, the benefit won't accrue. But here Krishna says, on this path, there's no loss. Even a little bit has, even performing this system of yoga partially and not completing it, even a little practice, it brings benefit that is lasting. And then a little bit after that, well, the next verse actually, he says that those who practice karma yoga, their minds are focused, single pointed focus like an arrow. They're not, their minds aren't divided in many different directions because they're on Atma Gati, the path, the journey of the soul. And then here in this verse, verse 45, Krishna now explains that this yoga path, he explains how this yoga path relates to the many teachings in the Vedas and in what ways it's more effective. So, turning to the Sanskrit, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Kshema Atmavan. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to them, to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So, looking at this verse, for those of you who are interested in the Sanskrit, maybe some of you have some knowledge of Sanskrit already or an interest in it, I want to point out a few things. So at the beginning, Traigunya Vishaya Veda. Vishaya means subject, and Traigunya means the three gunas. And we'll have a look at what the three gunas are in a moment. But here Krishna is saying the Vedas deal with the subject of the three gunas, the three modes. These are three qualities that that make up the field of perception. And then Krishna says, Nistraigunya. Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. So Bhava means to become. So, O Arjuna, become free from the three gunas. And then he says, one who is established in the self, so Atmavan, one who is established in the self, is free from dualities and observes the eternally unchanging state of the self and has no interest in gain or protection. So that's very interesting there, that those words, Nid Yoga Kshema. So one meaning of yoga is acquisition. And Nid Yoga means without acquisition. And Kshema means protection or preservation. So in other words, such a person who's situated, established in the self, has no interest in gain or in protecting what has been gained. So we'll have a look at why. I mean, you can see that someone who has reached that state, they are beyond the three gunas. They're beyond the qualities that make up the fabric of this perceptual universe. It's very unusual to find someone who's free from an interest in gain and free from protecting what they have already. So first, let's take a look at the three gunas. And now the three gunas is a topic that is perhaps a little more widespread than it used to be. And that's thanks to yoga and Ayurveda and many disciplines from from India that have kind of circulated to the Western world and globally, really. So the three gunas are three qualities that make up the world that we see. And I guess maybe one way to explain this is uh, so I'm going to actually draw on a book that I've authored called Yoga and the Dark Night of the Soul. Because in there, I give an anecdote, something that I experienced when I visited Paris many years ago. And this explains why, I think, will help understand why the gunas is such an important topic. It is a topic also that Krishna will return to several times in the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And it's a topic, the gunas are a topic that form part of Sankhya, an ancient system of philosophy known as Sankhya. So I'm going to read a little bit here. I don't think I can express this uh, um, like it'll it'll be more interesting for you if I read it, I think, than if I try to express it on the fly. So we turned the corner, and there she was, the Eiffel Tower. I had been to this iconic Paris landmark several times, and I confess I find lifeless monuments a little disappointing. When I'm finally in front of them, there's something oddly flat or pedestrian about them. On this summer morning, however, it was different. I had never seen the Eiffel Tower as magnificent as this, not even in pictures. The monument hadn't changed. The city hadn't changed. I was much the same person. So, what was different? My vantage point. So, most tourists head straight to the base of the Eiffel Tower. This time, we had Ariana, a close friend, teaching at La Sorbonne, as our tour guide. And she took us to Trocadero, perched on a hilltop on the other side of the river Seine from the tower. Across a gorgeous park and tiled plaza, complete with gilded statues, you're exposed to a stunning, unobstructed view of the Eiffel Tower. Local Parisians were enjoying their lunch on the steps. I felt I was in on a secret. What we see depends not only on what we're looking at, but also where we're looking from. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes to some lengths to explain this to Arjuna. So that's the important point about the gunas. We can look at the same thing, but if we are looking at it from a particular influence of these three qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas, is what they're known in Sanskrit, then what we see will be, the way we see the world will be different. So on a journey, I'll continue. On a journey, it's important to understand the terrain. Some terrains offer beautiful, unobstructed views and make for an easy passage. Some are troublesome and require immense effort. Others are dark and treacherous, liable to confound and entrap the traveler. Krishna differentiates between three types of terrain: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Think of sattva as the hilltops of life. They offer us clear, undisturbed panoramic views. When the mind is influenced by sattva, a person feels satisfied at heart. She's no longer troubled by a million longings. Sattva manifests as mindfulness, tranquility, and wisdom. The Sanskrit word sattva means beingness and refers to a deep awareness of what is. I just want to stop here for a moment and mention that uh, by the influence of various forms of Buddhist teachings, the idea of being present, so the idea of presence, has become quite popular in the West. Presence is very much the same as sattva. It's sattva literally means beingness. So continuing, but it's difficult to remain on the mountaintop. We are forced back down to the more troublesome slopes of striving and attachment, and into the murky valleys of lethargy and forgetfulness. Rajas is a vantage point on life that fills a person with a million desires, leading her to be anxious ceaselessly striving and forever dissatisfied. A person influenced by rajas is always trying to reshape the world. The rajas terrain involves a difficult climb up a steep slope with all the exertion, longing, triumph, and frustration of such a pursuit. Then you have tamas, the dark valleys of life, with treacherous, disorientating marshes and haunted forests of bewilderment. When lost in tamas, which literally means darkness, the word tamas in Sanskrit means darkness, then we fall into lamentation, moroseness, self pity, resentment, frustration, anger, hatred, and a myriad other forms of negativity. This is the terrain we're likely to find ourselves during a dark night of the soul. It can manifest as a strong desire to give up on life. Travelers can find themselves stuck in tamas for an excessively long time. They drift into an existential sleep, even while appearing awake. They forget why they're on the road, or even that there is a journey at all. Millennia ago, the sages of India differentiated between sattva, rajas, and tamas to help us live more consciously, to help us better understand our own state of consciousness, the qualities of our environment, and how those qualities influence us. Krishna summarizes these three competing qualities by what they produce in our heart. And here I'm citing from the Gita. Wisdom arises from sattva, greed arises from rajas, and negligence and bewilderment arise from tamas, as well as folly. Krishna has already explained the nature of the self, the knower of the field. Now he wants us to understand the field itself. The yoga warrior must understand who she is, but she must also be able to navigate the field of life. So that's something of a summary of these three qualities that make up our perceptual world. Now, what's important is that we find these three qualities in everything that we do. So, for example, there are different forms of communication. These three qualities are they're always competing with each other for dominance. And you never find just one of them. They're always mixed. But one of them will tend to be predominant. So sattva can be predominant, rajas can be predominant, tamas can be predominant. You see that, for example, in foods. Different foods can be influenced by sattva, rajas, or tamas. Sattva are healthy, wholesome foods, fruits and vegetables, things that are not filled with pesticides and so on. Rajas are foods that are, we go for them because they're very tasty, but they're not necessarily healthy for us. And tamas are destructive. Tamas is food that is stale. Meat, fish, eggs is tamas because it's a product of violence. So even not just foods, but everything can be looked at from this perspective of the three qualities that make up our perceptual world. So I have in a previous episode touched on communication. I like looking at communication through the three gunas because it really helps us understand. It's like a really good tool for everyday life. So communication can be predominated by sattva, rajas, or tamas. So when it's predominated by tamas, what does it look like? It looks destructive. So it's when we put someone else down. We find a way to criticize them. We want to dismantle what they're saying. And we can also apply that to ourselves. So there's something that happens for each of us. It's called self-talk. We can self-talk in tamas. And then rajas is a different type of communication. Rajas is very animated. And it can seem even interesting. In rajas, we have an agenda. That's the key point. So we're trying to either impress someone else with what we're saying, or we're trying to convince them of something, or alternatively, we want to show that we're right. Those are characteristics of an agenda-driven communication that's propelled by rajas. Now, communication in sattva has a totally different quality. And I like sharing this because I think we've all experienced these three types of communication. So it makes it really tangible. The gunas are not meant to be something kind of intellectual. We can experience this in everyday life directly. So in sattva, you have two people or more who are able to temporarily suspend their own agendas and truly be present to the other person. And they're able to listen. Now, when two people have a conversation in sattva, there are two characteristics, two features of that, or two results of that. One of them is that we feel vitality, we feel more alive. And the second is we feel intimacy with that other person. We feel like they've entered our world and we've entered their world. So in rajas, you might have two or several people, discussing in a very animated way, but at the end of it, you don't feel vitality. You feel a little bit tired, drained. And you don't necessarily feel intimacy with the other people who've been at the table speaking with you. But in sattva, you have those two results, vitality and intimacy. So I think we've all experienced that, and we tend to experience that very much so when we meet up with family. So, end of the year, Christmas time, or holiday period, we all come together with family members who we haven't seen maybe for the past year, or in some cases for several years. And you'll see, like, it can be quite awkward because there'll be there'll be competing gunas. You'll have comments and parts of the conversation that are fueled by rajas. You'll have parts that are very much predominated by tamas, and then you'll have also sattva, and you can watch and see these energies, these qualities competing with each other in the conversations that are happening. And understanding that and being able to see that allows us to operate ourselves from sattva, and also not to react or be triggered by conversation that comes from, maybe from rajas, or especially from tamas. So these are the three gunas. And one thing about the Gita is that it assumes quite a bit of knowledge. So someone who'd be reading the Gita or listening to it more likely in India in times, in previous times, they would have already been aware of sattva, rajas, and tamas. It doesn't need so much explanation. But for many of us, some of these ways of looking at our perceptual world might be a little bit new. And so I thought that early on, at this stage, when the gunas are so prominently mentioned in this verse, it would be good to explain them a little bit. Now, we move now to the teachings of Karma Yoga. So on Monday, we looked at the 3 steps of Karma Yoga, 3 components. The first one is be true to your nature, your own nature. Let go of the fruits is number 2. And number 3 is make your work an offering. So we looked at be true to your own nature because that's such an important component. Krishna stresses that. In one place, Krishna says, how does he put it? In a very strong way, what can repression do? What purpose can repression fulfill? In other words, someone who has the nature of, we're not all built in the same way. Someone might have the nature of a teacher. Someone might be like a warrior. Warriors these days, we find them in different areas of life. It doesn't necessarily mean on the physical battlefield. We have warriors in the legal system, for example, or fighting for human rights and so on, and against injustice. But someone who's naturally propelled in that direction is because there's something in them. There's part of their personality or nature that is aligned with that. And so we're not all built the same way. So Krishna is saying here that the way that we're constructed is a gift, a very valuable gift, and it's the vehicle through which we can fulfill our purpose in this world, and through which we can be of service in this world. The second teaching Krishna gives is let go of the fruits, and we looked at that last Monday, that when we become overly attached to outcomes, then it brings out all the unskillful ways of acting. We become anxious, we become overly controlling, we begin to micromanage, and so on. But someone who's practicing karma yoga, the yoga of skillful action, understands that we can put our heart into what we do. We can try our very best, but at the end of the day, how things end up is beyond our own control. So someone practicing karma yoga doesn't obsess about the results. They let go of the results. And in fact, letting go of the results is so important. Sometimes, it opens up a space for incredible things to happen. I've experienced that in my own life. When you let go of the fruits, sometimes the end outcome is more astonishing and incredible than one might even have imagined at the beginning. And sometimes it's unexpected as well. And then the third step, the third component, is make your work an offering. So we didn't have time to look at that in the last episode on Monday. So we'll continue from here, but briefly. So this is a very important step, because when we make our work an offering, what we do becomes more than just about us. That's the first point. We shift our attitude. The attitude we bring to what we do changes. So rather than thinking, what's wrong with this situation, we might think, what can I do to make it better? Rather than considering, what am I not getting? We begin to think, what can I give? So it's a very important component. And Krishna explains, one who offers her actions to the divine, having let go of attachment, is not affected by misfortune, as water does not cling to a lotus leaf. What a beautiful teaching. By making our efforts an offering of love, an act of service, we actually purify our being. We are released from misfortune. So to make everything we do part of our yoga practice, Krishna has added this third and final teaching of karma yoga. In other words, Krishna says, turn it over to me. Turn it over to the soul of the universe, present in the heart. Make whatever you do an offering of devotion to me. Make it an offering to the divine within you and within all beings. In this way, your work becomes an act of worship, a pure expression of the soul. Now, what's important also is that we cannot make what we do an offering of devotion if we're not present to what we're doing. But if what we are doing is an act of love, we're automatically deeply present. For example, if I'm cooking a meal for someone that I love, I'll select the very best ingredients. I'll pick my recipes very carefully. All of my attention will be focused on what I'm doing, because it's an act of love. So when we do everything as an act of devotion to Krishna, the soul of the universe, present in the heart of each of us, our work automatically, we're very present to what we're doing. We're not attached to overly controlling and obsessed about outcomes. We basically rewrite our narrative, our human story. Now we're no longer writing our story out of fear, lamentation, and confusion. We begin writing our story out of love and devotion. So at that point, our work, everything we do, becomes a sacred act, an act of divine worship. Only love and affection has the power to fulfill the soul or to attract the soul of the universe, the soul of all souls. And by connecting with Krishna through yoga, especially through loving service, the rishis understood that they were connecting with something far greater than them. They were connecting with the source of all potency. So, in its ultimate expression, the yoga of action is living through deeds of love. This is the way to use our energy fully in the service of life. If we could wrap every thought we have in unconditional love, our life would be utterly transformed. And this, Krishna explains, this system, this system of karma yoga or skillful action allows us to transcend even the gunas, the three qualities that form the fabric of our perceptual world. We have just a few moments. I want to explain or share with you something about this transformation from an unskillful action to skillful action. And I want to do that using a mudra. So I think that many of you will be familiar with mudras already. Mudras are gestures of the hand or the body that represent a particular quality of consciousness. So when when a mudra is done with the hands, it's known as hasta mudra. So at the beginning of the Gita, you have the words of the blind king Dhritarashtra, who's acting unskillfully, so the opposite of karma yoga. And he's completely obsessed about outcomes, if you remember. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yoyutsava mamaka pandavaschaiva kim akurvata sanjaya. My sons, the sons of Pandu, what happened? Tell me Sanjay, what happened? He's filled with fear, lamentation, attachment, and illusory ego. And at the very end of the Gita, after Krishna has explained 18 systems of yoga, he tells Arjuna what the results of that yoga practice are. So if you take those two verses, the beginning and the end, and you were to represent them using a mudra, what would that look like? So you're not able to see, but here on my desk, I have a pile, literally a pile of gemstones, amethysts, rose quartz, opals, agates, a ruby as well, quartz crystal, tourmaline, and so on. So, beautiful gems. So if you think of these gems as the various gifts that we've been accorded in this life, and they may be different for each of us. We have so many gifts, we might not even always be fully aware of them because we take so much for granted, or at least I know I do. So we may have good health, intelligence, beauty, financial stability, friends, so many things. Connection with some understanding of wisdom, especially the wisdom of the Gita, our yoga practice, the teachers in our life, our own unique personality or nature that allows us to be of service in the world. All of these are jewels. Whether we're aware of them or not, they're jewels. Now, there are two ways that we can approach life. And one of them would be like this. One of them would be like this, right? I don't know if you can see that. So here I have, I'm holding as many jewels as I can, gemstones in my hand, with my fists firmly closed. So if this mudra could speak, what would it say? It would say, I'm going to take as much as I can, and I'm going to hold on to it very tightly. Because if I release my grasp, if I release my grip, what I'm holding on to will fall away from me. I'll lose it, or someone may take it from me. Now, the problem with this particular mudra or this particular approach to life is that when we hold with this mudra, right, if the universe wants to give us more, we're not actually in a position to be able to accept it. Our hands are firmly closed. But there is a different approach, an approach that is exactly the inverse of this. So instead of holding our uh, holding our hand in this direction, we can turn it around in this direction. And instead of having closed fingers, we can have an open palm. So it's exactly the reverse of the previous mudra. Now, when we adopt this particular approach to life, you'll see that this is the mudra not only of accepting, receiving, it's also the mudra of giving. So with this particular approach to life, we're open even to accepting further gifts in our life. And in fact, someone who adopts this approach of making what they do an offering, they completely change the dynamic with which they're operating in this world. And I mean, I think many of us may have had this experience. Certainly, I've had this experience in my own life. When I've adopted a closed-fisted approach, the results have always been limitation, constriction, and things have always become very small. And every time I've not worried about outcomes and results. I've not been worried about trying to kind of accumulate and protect what I have. When I've adopted an approach that is based on giving, that's based on service, surprising and magical things have happened. I've received more than I could have even expected or imagined. Now, in India, the palm of the hand symbolizes the heart. Right? So that's why you may know the mudra, the Anjali mudra. Right? This means, one of the meanings of this is my heart and your heart are one. So we can adopt this mudra, but if in doing the Anjali mudra, if we're not feeling that, if we're not expressing that particular consciousness, my heart and your heart are one, we're not actually performing Anjali mudra correctly. It simply becomes, it's simply, I mean, you can take, for example, as an extreme, you know, if someone has passed away, you can put their hands together like this, but they're not actually doing Anjali mudra. Anjali mudra performed correctly is an expression of consciousness. So when we have that the consciousness that accompanies the mudra, then the mudra is performed, the mudra is expressed perfectly. So in the same way, the heart is the palm of the hand is represented by the heart. So if you look at figures or deities in India of saints or of saints and deities, you'll see they always have an open palm like that, an open palm, never a closed fist. And so adopting this particular approach, and especially when we adopt it through the method of karma yoga, where what we do becomes an offering to the divine, an offering to the soul of the universe present in the heart of each of us, Sri Krishna, then the way that we approach the world completely changes. And we're able actually to step beyond the play of form, the gunas that make up the fabric of this world. This is the teaching that Krishna is giving in this particular verse. The Vedas, most of the Vedas tends to relate to the subject of the three gunas. But Krishna says that karma yoga is so potent that it can actually pull us out of the perceptual, the qualities. Guna also can mean what binds us. So these various qualities bind us. So for example, when we're in tamas, or if someone is in tamas, it's actually quite difficult to pull them out of tamas. You know, someone is in tamas and they're not leaving their room and they're feeling despondent. You know, you open up the curtains and you don't like The person in bed doesn't like the curtains to be opened. We become attached to the configuration of the gunas that we're most accustomed to, that we're most comfortable in. And so these gunas actually bind a person. Even sattva is a rope that binds us. How does sattva bind us? We know this from, for example, often in those who practice yoga have a high quotient of sattva. But how does sattva bind us? We become attached to feeling peaceful, and we become attached to tranquility. You take someone in sattva and put them in an environment where there's a lot of noise, they won't. They'll suffer there. They won't like that. But someone who has been able to transcend the gunas can can operate in any environment unaffected, just like drops on a lotus leaf or a lotus leaf or a lotus petal. They just roll off, and the flower is unaffected. So these are Krishna's teachings on karma yoga, and he is here explaining the benefits of karma yoga. In the verses to come, he will also begin explaining one verse. He'll begin explaining one step at a time the teachings of karma yoga and how to practice it effectively. We'll stop here, and very much looking forward to Krishna's teachings on karma yoga that are yet to come.
Thank you so much, Simon. Um, Truthfully, today has been eye-opening for myself, and I'm pretty sure it's also going to be for many who are catching live or going to be watching this video later on YouTube. I welcome everybody who would like to join live. They can do it every Monday at 7.
Thank you so much, Atul. I think Atul Krishna Prabhu. I think there might have been a little connection problem today, but we'll stop here. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I especially want to thank Colleen. I've noticed that she's been here with us. I think almost every episode. Thank you so much, Colleen. See you all next time.